Alright, everyone, welcome back to the latest episode of The Adventures of the Monk and the Monarch. With me, the Monarch, and my co host, Mildra the Monk.
Hello.
Alright. So, today we're going to be going back to something similar we did a while ago. This time, we're going to be building a martial arts anime. Said, before we actually get into that, though, start with what we've been watching this past month.
I will admit that there was a gap of a couple weeks where I wasn't watching a whole lot, largely because I was in a hotel and I don't like messing with hotel Wi-Fi. Why was I in a hotel? I was between houses since there was a few days between my move out date and my move in date. To explain why there was that gap is a very complicated story that I do not have enough alcohol on hand to go into details on.
I'll be a little limited in what I've been talking about as well, just because of a lot of nonsense work stuff going on. That's a good few hours. It would probably require its own fair bit of alcohol. But I did try to watch some shows that kind of related to what we were going to be talking about today. And the first thing I sat down and watched was the Street Fighter II, the animated film.
Which is pretty damn good and has given me the running meme of Vega getting hit with a couch.
Okay, that was legitimately my favorite fight in that whole movie. Now, at first, you might be telling yourself, was it your favorite fight because of all the Chun-Li fan service? No, but that helped. It was just really fun seeing like the two most agile fighters in the show bouncing around a small restricted area. Chun-Li legs, that was just a bonus. Like, it's one of those movies, I think if how much you enjoy it depends on what you're gonna go in expecting to see. Like, there's a lot of movies or shows I would give shit for all of the incredibly pointless fights that go on that exist to do nothing but pad out the movie. Like, there was no reason for DJ to be there. For people who like Street Fighter, wanted to see some fun, fully animated fights with all those Street Fighter characters.
Yeah, I will admit that the animated movies that came after are slightly better at balancing the character showcasing with story. Alpha is of course the peak. If there's anything that really contributes to a lot of the mythos when it comes to a lot of characters we're familiar with Street Fighter, I'd say it's that, especially since the narrative for a lot of the characters just going with the first couple games, or rather with two, because nobody played the original Street Fighter due to it being frustrating as hell and on systems that most people didn't have. I mean, did you know anybody who had a TurboGrafx 16?
I think so.
I rest my case.
But yeah, I will say though, for the movie, Bison is fantastic. I like how it's basically no bullshit with anything for Bison. And you get this brief moment where he's with Vega talking about Chun-Li to him, where Vega's not saying anything, it's just him, and he cuts himself off from his own stupid bullshit for a minute there. It's great. I love Bison.
Mhm. Now, granted, the absolute peak when it comes to fighting games getting OVAs is still Fatal Fury, but Street Fighter 2 isn't any slouch. Although you can certainly do worse. You could have sat through the Art of Fighting movie. As somebody who's suffered through Art of Fighting, I have very strong opinions on that movie.
Now see, what I should have rewatched was Tekken. Just because I love seeing Heihachi just catch an axe with his teeth and bite it.
Mm-hmm.
It was also my first time watching anything related to Baki the Grappler. Grappler Baki, the Ultimate Fighter. I mentioned this something briefly about this on Discord. I think this is a great way to like just set up a professional wrestling match, which is effectively what this movie was.
You know, I've seen people get on the physiques of characters in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and I'm like, you would have an aneurysm looking at the muscles seen in Baki. You have people whose abs have abs.
But yeah, like if the movie's anything to go by, if I ever watch the series, I'll probably enjoy it. Only other thing I really did is I haven't gotten through it all again, but I've been rewatching Kenichi, History's Strongest Disciple.
Mm-hmm.
Name will vary depending on what version you're watching. I
Yeah.
realize fourth unperverted humor like within this show, like
Hmm.
When it's Kenichi, it's not really that entertaining to me. When it's Ma Kensei, he's hilarious. That is a pervert that I can get behind.
If you were to do a buy or sell between him and Haposai as far as who's the better character in that archetype of the perv martial arts master,
I've not seen a whole lot of Ranma One Half. It's one of the classics I'm missing out on. I think the only thing that kind of keeps me from really loving the show is Mai. Is that her name? May? She does not interest me in the slightest, like as a character. But she's kind of central to Kenichi being there. She gets a lot of screen time. I'm still really liking the show again, going back through it again. Like, I like the whole cowardly hero idea. Something that's been around a long time. It's done very well. They get a lot of great jokes out of it. A lot of good serious moments. And I forgot how much I love the Sebastian bits. I'm glad that joke isn't, like, beaten into the ground. It seems they use it exactly the right amount.
if you ever get a chance, you should read the Caiaphas Cain novels. Especially if you like the whole idea of the hero who's kind of a coward.
Yeah, like, I do think they do a great job with it on Kenichi. Like, his cowardice really is an impediment. Like, it does hold him back, so it's a very real flaw in the show. It's not one of the shows that'll just be like, oh, he's a total coward, but oh, the moment everything's goes wrong, boom, he's just there doing all the right shit.
Uh,
Kenichi actually is working through that more and more as the show progresses. I appreciate that.
I'm guessing those were the main two.
Well, three, but yeah, I've not really had a chance to sit down and watch anything else.
Hmm. As for myself, I am still going through Trigun Stampede. Obviously, most of what I said last time still applies. I really hope Studio Orange gets more roles, roles and work where they can showcase their stuff going forward when this series finishes. I have started to dip into season 2 of Vinland Saga. Once again, it is very surreal to see a series that I had been waving the flag for a decade finally get its due. One other thing I should note, because we finished this for the Parliament of Geeks earlier this week, is Kaiba. Kaiba is, well, for starters, it's a Masaki Yuasa joint, one that he directed and wrote. So expect drugs. The best way. I say that, but Masaki Yuasa, the reason why his approach is so strange, even going back to his first movie, Mind Game, which was his debut, he is somebody who is constantly trying to see how far he can stretch what animation is supposed to be, and still have it count as animation. That was one of his goals with Mind Game, was to see how far he could stretch the idea of animation. Kaiba is very high concept, especially with the whole swapping memories between bodies thing. That's a major theme throughout. But its visual style is what's going to be the big elephant in the room. Since the best way for me to describe it is if Dr. Seuss and Osamu Tezuka collaborated. That is the best way for me to describe the very interesting visuals. You're certainly not going to confuse Kaiba with anything else.
The next time I have like a drought of anime I'm needed to watch and review, I'm going to sit there and watch all of this stuff. That way we can actually do an episode on this guy.
Yeah, I do think that Masaki Yuasa is someone who while he's not on the same iconic level as some of the other people we've talked about, there's enough. He has a unique enough contribution to the point where if I see his name on a project, I'm going to have some degree of interest, because you look at his body of work, and he doesn't really like having a set style. It's not like, say, Zabek, where I can look at an anime and immediately tell if it's a Zabek piece, or even Satoshi Kon's stuff. He has a certain visual style that he pretty much sticks to. Same with Miyazaki. Yuasa, not really. If there's anything consistent about him, it's the fact that he wants to put people through drug trips. That's it. There are a couple. I do have what anime is gonna be next on the list after spinning the wheel. We're gonna be going through Kiznaiver, so I'll have an excuse to talk about Studio Trigger again in the future. Because it's not like I dedicated an entire episode of the Geek Watch podcast to Gainax and subsequently Studio Trigger. But that's what I've got as far as anime goes. I know I didn't focus too much on the martial arts end of things, but that's because, one, I already have enough martial arts stuff in my head as it is, and two, I was trying to get back up to speed on things when I finally settled in. You ever try and arrange 200 hardcover books and carry 200 hardcover books over a couple flights of stairs? When I finally got everything packed up, I wanted to fucking die.
I can imagine. I think the first thing we're going to want to establish, though, going into this discussion, is where we're going to draw the line on what classifies as a martial arts anime. This is something I brought up a while ago. I sent Mildra the list. I'd have to go find the link again. The shit that people will classify as martial arts anime for the sake of making a list is fucking
God,
stupid.
this. How the fuck is My Hero Academia a martial arts anime?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure Fire Force was also on that list. What the fuck?
That list angered me.
If you can find that list, this is as perfect a time as any to go through that list and
Okay, hold on. I'm pretty sure I can just scroll up here. I probably have a link I sent you. It's a little ways back because this is a while ago.
Oh no, I found it. From Gizmo Story, the 50 best martial arts anime of all time. I remember looking at this and thinking, this is the reason why people are being let go from these journalism websites.
You send me that link real quick. Because I want to look at it because I hate myself.
Designers and creative folks are masochists in some form, but there's the list. So
Cowboy Bebop's on this list.
We're just gonna go through from 50 to 1 and go what the fuck. First off, Taboo Tattoo, which I'm going to withhold on because I have not seen it.
I will say it at least says who is trained in martial arts in the description.
And magic tattoos is a thing in a lot of martial arts fantasy, in a classical sense. So I'm not going to completely write it off. I just can't say much because I haven't seen it.
I will just grant them that. But we go on to number 49, which is Cowboy Bebop.
The only thing martial arts is Spike knowing Jeet Kune Do.
Mind you, that is more than some of the other shows on this list have. But
and even then, if you're gonna bring up his time in Venus where he's teaching that kid to be like water, so much of Cowboy Bebop is channeling pop culture from the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
So that would include Bruce Lee. Bento is number 48, which I can somewhat stretch it and work with it, even though it's a more comedic approach that is focused more on supermarket fights.
I don't know much about the next one, Sengoku Basara.
Sengoku Basara is more of historical fantasy than anything else.
Yeah, like I've not seen it, but I saw that. I'm like, I don't think this would count.
I would say it wouldn't count because what you're dealing with is crazy ass alt history. Since it's an adaptation of a video game, so that's two things that are going to disqualify it. Kurokami I think this would be the first one since number 50 that I could actually count.
I would have to defer to you on that one. It's not one I'm familiar with. Same with the next one, Kurozuka.
Kurozuka,
Well, okay, I
I
am
have
just
not.
going to go with their description. This is one of those type of shows with vampires and other such things. I'm not even gonna read the rest of that. Vampires. Their description does not make it sound like a martial arts anime.
Next is Unbreakable Machine Doll.
I'm
No,
just basing this off the name. That sounds like some bullshit.
under Unbreakable Machine Doll has far. Just because you have Sakuga level fight scenes does not make you a martial arts anime. Then we have Hero Tales, which from the description seems more like a fantasy story than it does a
Yeah.
martial arts anime. Airmaster, yeah, I'm willing to count that.
I will definitely count Tenho Tenge.
Yeah, although I would say don't watch the anime, read the manga.
I remember seeing the anime. It's fine. It
It's
clearly
fine. It's
ends
just the manga. It's
early.
just the manga. It was yeah. It
Tenho
was one
Tenge
of
was
those
a
cases.
victim of one of those old animes that got an adaptation that only adapted a portion of the material. But even if you didn't know that, there is clearly a lot missing. Throw that in the same group as shows like The Get Backers.
Mhm. Jubei Ninpucho, I have not seen, so I'm not going to put too much into that. I do see that the writer is Toshiki Inoue, who is somebody I am very familiar with, for better and for worse. Tiger Mask double, I will actually count that.
Yeah, like I'll count it. I don't know too much about the shows, but I know it's basically pro wrestling, and that kind of gets
Tiger
mixed
Mask
in.
is a
Yeah,
wrestling character that has a long
yes,
lineage and has been represented
yeah,
in both actual pro wrestling and otherwise. A
yeah,
lot of people got their start by by playing the Tiger Mask character in wrestling,
yeah. Like,
or some variation of it.
I'm very
Um,
familiar with the history of Tiger Mask. Now, there's gonna be
mhm,
some people that'll tell you pro wrestling shouldn't count as martial arts. I say fuck you. I count it. It's pro
mhm.
wrestling. I will throw that with martial arts.
What's notable about Tiger Mask W is it was done in collaboration with New Japan Pro Wrestling, and a lot of New Japan talent make appearances. In particular, Hiroshi Tanahashi, the the once in a century talent. Now, Legend of the Condor Hero, I am obligated to count it because Condor Heroes is one of the big is one of the big four when it comes to wuxia fiction. So I kind of have to.
I will reluctantly count the God of High School. Not because like for the most part I'm like, okay, yes, this is a martial arts anime. And then there's a guy who says his martial art is I summon a tiger from the not a tiger. I summon a shark from the ether to eat you.
In all fairness, that's actually par for the course when it comes to a lot of wuxia stories.
Yeah, like so I will reluctantly count the God of High School.
Mm-mm.
Now, I don't know how
Uh,
this list is ranking this stuff. I don't know how you would rank this higher than some of these other shows.
yeah. Um, Zumo, I will count because its focus is sumo.
Hey, if I'm gonna count pro wrestling as martial arts, I will count sumo.
We would not be
Yeah.
weebs if we did not acknowledge sumo wrestling.
Yes. I still want to watch this one. It
Hmm.
looked good. It was on my list of stuff to get to.
Yeah. Carried by the Wind, Tsukikage Ran. I'm willing to. This is borderline because it is kind of one of those historical fiction
Yeah.
affairs, but I'm willing to count it.
Yeah. Street Fighter 2 v. Yeah. I will count any of the Street Fighter stuff as martial arts.
Hmm.
Same thing for any
Yawara.
Tekken stuff.
Yeah. Yawara, since it is focused on judo, I'm I'm willing to. I haven't seen it. I'm willing to at least somewhat count it. Although once I see Inoue's name as the writer, but the way it's described feels more like a slice of life than a martial arts piece.
I mean, I don't entirely trust this story's descriptions, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If we're judging it by what it's giving us, probably pass is martial arts, maybe.
Baki the Grappler, obviously we gotta count that.
Oh yeah.
Virtua Fighter, obviously we gotta count that.
Yeah.
Shura no Toki, Age of Chaos, I'd say that'd count.
Yeah.
Sword Art Online, what the fuck is this doing here? Even if I didn't have my beef with Reiki Kawahara, I'd still ask, why is this here?
All right, like so far, every one of these, we can at least stretch for a justification to call it martial arts. It may be a bullshit stretch, but it exists. I got fucking nothing.
Mm-mm. Afro Samurai. This one is.
I mean, I love it.
I love Afro Samurai to death, but as far as calling it a martial arts anime, when a lot more of the focus is it being a revenge tale, I'd say Afro Samurai has more in common with samurai tragedy than it does anything else.
Like, I'm gonna give it. I'm not counting Afro Samurai as a martial arts anime.
Darker Than Black, absolutely not.
Okay, this is unrelated, but I don't know if I'm ever gonna get a chance to bitch about this again. I hated so much. He was like built up like that first season was great before he lost his power. Yeah, minor spoiler. It's old enough. I don't care.
Statutes passed.
Yeah, but then it gets into the second season, and you get to find out why they called him the Grim Reaper. Because before he had that power, he was fighting all of these users and winning without any kind of ability. It's like, cool. We're actually gonna get to see him do. He's getting his ass kicked by everybody.
Yeah, nobody likes Gemini the Meteor.
That was such a fall off in quality. Like, I liked that first season so much.
I look at Gemini of the Meteor the way I look at Endless 8 for Haruhi, where it did so much damage that when they tried to course correct, it was too late. Because the OVAs that came after Gemini the Meteor were better, much like how the Disappearance of Haruhi movie was better than Endless 8, but by then the damage was done.
Yeah. That out of the way. Next to Sword of the Stranger.
I consider Sword of the Stranger feels like just from the story and all that, this feels like again a historical drama or a period drama rather than a martial arts.
Yeah.
That being said, everybody should watch Sword of the Stranger.
It's another one that's been on my list for so long. I need to get to this movie.
Katana Gatari.
I don't even know what this one is.
It seems to be focused on swords, which is a move, but I'm not sure if it's enough of one. There is no reason Akame ga Kill should be on this list. That is a straight up fantasy story. Shigurui, I'm willing to let that one slide. There is given the focus is on a particular swordsmanship school. Yeah, sorry about that.
You're
Don't
good.
know what that was about.
You got the whole point in, basically.
Yeah.
Now, I have no problem counting Megalobox as a martial arts anime.
No, this would fit the whole thing to a T.
Yeah.
Ranma 1/2. Yeah, I kind of have to. I would lose my cred if I didn't. Fairy Tail. What the fuck is this doing here? Why is Ranma 1/2 in here twice?
they had to fill out 50.
Kengan Ashura, I have seen an episode or two of. This one I'm willing to count.
It looked good. Like, it's another one I looked at explicitly because I was looking for some martial arts animes. It seems legit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talked Kenichi.
Yeah, I'd
We'll
say
count that.
Mm-hmm. Fist of the North Star. I would say
Lean, yes.
Yeah, there's a whole. The problem with using some of these is that the martial arts part is an element, but not the main focus. And should that really count? And I'd argue for discussing martial arts anime, no. Seirei no Moribito, that's more of a.
Okay. I didn't know about this, but it says I'm just going to go with the description saying it's kind of related to Basilisk, and say no.
Both it and Basilisk come across more as historical dramas. Why is Hokuto no Ken in here twice? You have Fist of the North Star, and then you have Hokuto no Ken. Yu Yu Hakusho.
That's pushing it.
No. I know some people might say, but what about the tournament arcs that we got near the end? It still is. There's still
Look, my
far
hero
more
had
of an
a tournament
emphasis.
arc, and we'll get to that down the list.
Yeah. There's Yu Yu Hakusho throughout has had more of an emphasis on Japanese mythos and the mythology of that hidden world more than anything else.
Yeah.
Rurouni Kenshin, once again, I see Rurouni Kenshin as a historical drama, not a martial arts anime.
1 second.
Samurai Champloo, no.
1 second.
Same. Yeah, no.
Yeah, definitely not. Again, great show. I really like Champloo. Watanabe is probably going to be the focus of an episode down the line.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a martial arts anime.
Why is Naruto on this list?
I don't know. They're not even ninjas. I refuse to accept that they're ninjas.
I could go on a long rant on how much I hate the real ninjas argument as much as I hate the real spies argument with James Bond, but that's a whole other can of fish. As far as Dragon Ball Z, yeah, I
would count Dragon Ball more than I would count Dragon Ball Z.
Yes. By the time Z gets around, we're going into full on science fiction shit.
Effectively, where I would put the cutoff for where we're going to discuss what is a martial arts anime, Dragon Ball is kind of like my absolute limit. Like, if you get less martial arts than Dragon Ball, at least for the purpose of us, what we're building, it's out.
Mm-hmm. Hajime no Ippo, that counts.
Definitely.
Demon Slayer, why the fuck is this on here?
No more need said.
Why is Berserk also on here?
Like, no. In a listing of martial arts animes, these are ranking higher than actual martial arts animes. Why?
Berserk? No. Not even Golden Age would count. Golden Age is more of a war tragedy, and everything after that definitely doesn't count. When we get into full on dark fantasy. One Punch Man is a superhero parody, so that's automatically out.
Dualuo Dalu. I'm just assuming I'm saying that wrong.
Which I haven't seen, but from what I've looked into, it does seem to fit the role of a wuxia series. So I'm willing to cautiously count it. My Hero Academia has absolutely no fucking business being here.
There's a guy that does martial arts. He's got a tail.
Don't fuck with me. Hunter x Hunter has no business on this list.
And I think number 1 may be the worst choice of all on this list.
What the
just let this one sit for a minute before we actually say. Let everyone try to figure out, based on this list, what
their number one entry. Their number 1 entry is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. I love this series to death, but what the fuck is it doing here?
I got nothing.
This is the reason why nobody respects journalists.
I really just have nothing for this. What the fuck? Like, this list wasn't the impetus for this episode. This is just something I came across and sent to Mildra because it angered me.
So you wanted to inflict the same suffering on me. He's with friends like mine. Who needs enemies? All right, we are back at it.
Yep.
Well, as I was saying, the culture needs to be the focus. And to illustrate what I mean, let's consider doing an anime based on sports. Whether that be something like Slam Dunk, whether that be something like even Free or Yuri on Ice, or even a made up sport like say the Immortal Grand Prix in IGPX. You have a lot more than just the competition at play. You have the culture that the competitors surround themselves in, integrate themselves in. You have the you have the various schools, the various philosophies, the various approaches to the sport. You have the people who play fair and the people who are going to bend the rules. Obviously, I just realized one of the big ones I could have mentioned was Captain Tsubasa when it comes to this sort of thing. And I'm bringing up sports to illustrate the fact that at the end of the day, martial arts is a form of sport. There's a reason why there's certain martial arts that are in the Olympics, especially wrestling. Judo and Taekwondo have made their appearances, and I'm also going to include fencing on this. I know some people might say that shouldn't count. It does. That does mean that when taking the approach of wanting to do a martial arts anime, there's a wide net that can be cast. Now, one idea I was considering building around, and I'd be curious what your thoughts on it is. We have had martial arts stories that deal with a lot of different a lot of different fighting promotions and the like. But one approach that one approach that I think would be interesting to explore is mixed martial arts and mixed martial arts promotions. I know it would be very tempting to bring up UFC and say you want to make UFC in anime form. Not necessarily, but it is something worth drawing from. There of course was that golden age of MMA in Japan with Pride before Pride got hit with that massive scandal. If you're not familiar with what happened, basically it got revealed that some of Pride's money was coming from the Yakuza.
Of course it was.
You want to know what's really funny? Before all this happened, they came dangerously close to signing Brock Lesnar.
That'd have been interesting.
This was around that time when he had just left the WWE and was not on good terms with them because they wouldn't let him out of that long ass contract that he signed to the point where he sued them over it. And when he was in New Japan, although his New Japan run isn't exactly held in high regard, he had renamed the F5 into the Verdict. Just throw all the shade.
Look, I may not be the biggest Brock fan, but sometimes he wins me over. That's exactly how he does it. But I wouldn't mind a more MMA kind of focus.
Now, one of the big reasons that I wanted to go with that is that there's plenty of stories that can be told. Imagine somebody starting up in local promotions and then working their way up. That's one story you can tell. The other reason I'd go with this kind of thing is there is still a variety of styles that you can showcase. Yes, there's the grab bag of mixed martial arts, but not everybody who competes in MMA is going to focus on that style. Some people are going to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Some people are going to do kickboxing. Some people are going to do Muay Thai. Some people are going to do Pankration, which is Greek wrestling. Some people are going to do Sambo,
And I know
which
back in the early days of MMA, you had, I don't know like the entire meta, but there was that great clip of the 2 second knockout with the Capoeira kick, where the guy just fucking limp noodles to the ground within
yeah,
seconds.
that kind of thing has happened.
Yeah.
Crow Cop was infamous for those really hard kicks that were going to be the sound of a funeral.
And anime gives us a bit more of a chance to look at the more expansive early days of the UFC.
And I'm not saying
Yeah.
that it has to replicate the UFC per se,
Oh
but
yeah.
definitely have that sort of energy that
Yeah.
you see with either UFC or Bellator or One um or some of the weirder entries in Europe, including that one in Eastern
Yeah.
Europe where you have people in knight armor fighting in a glorified boxing
Yeah.
ring. Medieval TV, go look it up.
Now, one
But
thing I'd want to kind of put in as a stipulation, if since we're going a bit closer to that route, I know by technicality the inclusion of various styles of weapons is usually commonplace in martial arts anime. I mean, you had Vega with his claw. I mean, I'm not gonna
yeah,
let
but
that
Vega's
claw
an
say it's
assassin.
not. Yeah, but I don't think he makes it any less a martial arts anime by showing up with a claw. That said,
Uh,
I kind of
you're
want to try to
thinking of a
keep
no
this.
weapon rule.
Yes.
I am perfectly fine with that.
Now, again, it's not that I'm against weapons in my martial arts anime, but it's kind of when you think martial arts, the first thing that comes to mind aren't the weapons. It's
Hmm.
I'm gonna punch you in the face.
Yeah. That being said, I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to limit it to just the styles that I mentioned. This is an opportunity to have far more varied styles, including styles that might be considered impractical by the MMA scene.
Yeah.
So if there's any place where you can have something like say capoeira or Wing Chun or the like, this is as good a spot as any to do it.
Oh yes.
Consider Let's consider for a moment the different fighting styles that are represented in let's use since we talked about Street Fighter earlier, let's use that as our example for this. You have different forms of karate. You obviously have kung fu. You have capoeira. You have boxing. You have wrestling. You know, the one thing that I would not want to go with is the underground fighting ring motif. I feel like that's a little bit too played out.
Yeah.
Not to say I don't like the
Yeah.
idea. It's just I don't like the idea that that's what you have to do.
Yeah. I mean, that was the premise in the Grappler Baki Ultimate Fighter, and I really liked it. But I'm with you there. No need to bring an underground MMA thing into this.
Especially since when you do that, then that's your excuse to start bringing in dirty fighting with weaponry.
Now, this is an idea I brought up like a little while ago, like before we actually started the stream when we were discussing the actual topic. I pitched the idea of doing something similar to what we saw in a show called Hypnosis Mike. Now, I recall you saying you haven't actually watched Hypnosis Mike, so I will give you a quick rundown and our viewers a quick rundown of what I'm getting at here. If you're going to watch Hypnosis Mike, do it without reading into the backstory of why the show got made. Effectively, there were a bunch of like rap groups that were made to do like this big promotional thing. They were like did the diss tracks about each other. They were given like these fictional backstories. But then they actually went toe to toe in some rap battles. Fans would vote on who would win and they'd advance. After all of that was done, someone thought, let's actually make this an anime. So the anime follows the same voting that was going on, like amongst the groups. Like, whoever won these votes when the anime happened are still the ones who win. So if you look up what actually happened, you're going to be spoiled as to the results of the actual anime. That said, with how the anime was put together, like your first couple episodes were focused on the Buster Bros, then you got a couple episodes focused on Montero, and so
Mhm.
on and so forth. So you didn't really have a lead character for a while, up until like it culminated and somebody finally won.
Mhm.
It did a great job at keeping suspense. I really had no idea who was going to win. It was a really interesting idea, but I think you could very easily like supplant that into a martial arts anime.
An approach that I was thinking is once again, instead of doing one protagonist, I will always be in favor of doubling up on that
Yeah.
and going with two who are still the protagonists, but they have different
Yeah.
approaches. In this particular case, they these two grew up in the same martial arts school, but as they went pro, they went down different paths. Not one taking the good path or one taking the evil path, just different. I would probably have it. The reason I would want to do two is to have them represent two different approaches. One being focused on being a striker, the other one focused on being a grappler.
I'm wondering because Hypnosis Mike itself, it was 12 episodes.
Mhm.
With this and just like how varied, I think you could probably do something similar with like a full four people. Just
I was thinking I like to
yeah,
keep the cast low when I can get away with it. I was actually thinking 24 episodes split into two parts. The first part is a lengthy flashback going through their respective training as they go on their international excursions. The second part is the actual tournament, with the finals being the two friends against each other.
I think if you go 24 episodes, I don't know if you would need that much dedicated to like each person and
Oh,
flashbacks and
you're
building them up.
you're gonna be focusing
Yeah,
on the two of them in that first part.
yeah,
I say flashback, but
yeah,
it's more of that extended.
yeah.
Here's what happened that led up to this point in medias res, a la what we see with say Berserk or Shigurui. Because Shigurui's story starts with the fabled duel, and a lot of the story after that is the events that led up to that point. I'd be taking the same approach here.
I feel you. I just think you could kind of still do that, especially if you take a 24 episodes consideration with more than just the two. But I wouldn't be opposed to just keeping it at two either.
There's a very strong
Yes.
temptation to to add more characters with a you see
Yeah.
this with a lot of anime. This is the reason why I have such a high opinion of Riku Sanjo and his work, because he wants to give detailed looks into his characters. He wants to try and keep casts small if he can get away with it. Granted, Toei kind of screws him over because they keep giving him these massive casts to work with.
I mean, in the case of this, the focus is going to be four people. Unless, of course,
Just,
plus,
just curious.
minor ones here and there, but none that you would need to focus that heavily into.
Just curious why go with four?
A big reason I'd say four is, again, kind of one of the ideas is there's going to be a lot of diversity in the various styles. And I think having the full four would kind of fit that theme. Like, you're not going to just have two ways competing, like two mindsets competing against each other in an environment like this. Now, that
Hmm.
said, for purpose of keeping the story focused, you could still get away with that with two. But if you do it carefully, like, I do still think 4 is very viable. You could have like 4 guys, very different, each one built up strongly in the span of 24 episodes. As long as the core focus is those 4 characters and their inevitable confrontation at the end of whatever it is we're doing.
Okay, if we'd go with that, what for? Because I'd want each to represent a certain style.
Yeah.
What 4 styles would you pick for this foursome?
Just like a general thing rather than picking a very specific style. Someone that's heavily focused on like the strikes, like very aggressive.
Do you have any idea how little that narrows it down?
I know. But yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Think of the different martial arts styles you've seen throughout fiction and the like. And what 4 would you pick? What 4 would you pick? I know I have my own ideas on what 4 I'd pick, but I'd like to hear yours.
Let's see. Let's go with Muay Thai, a classic. A lot of people recognize it. Swap in some jiu-jitsu. I'd like to see a more unconventional Street Fighter kind of guy. Like, not the anime Street Fighter or games, but kind of a dirty fighter of sorts. Like, not cheating, but very unscrupulous to a degree within the rules. And something very agile. I don't know, let's just go with Capoeira. Just because it looks fun.
Personally, the 4 that I was thinking of was Aikido, Savate, Sambo, and I know it's one that you already dipped into, but Muay Thai.
I would definitely not be opposed to that set.
And even though each of these entries would be their focus, the approach that I'd think of is if I'm doing the half and half thing. They started out in just a MMA school. Then after a while, they decided to venture out and explore what else is out there. And as a result, you have them dipping into these other styles as they get more world experience.
I think fundamentally it'd be the same idea. It's just how many branches do we really want to do? I think 2 could keep it simpler. I think if you're careful, 4 would still be a good idea.
I can see that.
Like, for example, if we go the 24 episode route, that first half, I don't know if you need more than just 3 episodes each. Just to kind of establish them, show what they're doing, what they care, or why you should care about them. Then that build up in that second 12 episodes, you're inevitably going to see one of them rise to the top. No one really knowing which of the 4 it would be. It'd be the same idea if we're doing it with 2 people, just more time per person.
Fair enough.
That said, again, I could go either way on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'd want to keep it an even number just because you could split that easier into like the fights between like 2, then you have just 2 more left. Rather than this weird thing where 2 guys are pairing off before they fight the one. I think it'd be easier to handle just keeping it an even number. None of that 3 bullshit.
Yeah. I hate triple threat matches in wrestling. Well, with some rare exceptions, but again, they're rare exceptions.
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, you might be able to handle that easier if you're animating it than if you're having three guys just in the middle of a match trying to figure out how to make this look good and not stupid.
Like I said, there's
Yeah.
a lot of trip. You watch a lot. If you watch a fair amount of triple threat matches in wrestling, what you're going to end up seeing is folks do one on ones, and occasionally the third guy will swap in.
I love hearing stories of people who've gone to the live shows and are just they just see the guy laying there just doing fuck all. Like it sounds like it's so much worse if you're there to see it in person. Because at least you can't see the guy on camera. It's less distracting that way.
But I think you can see the method to my madness.
Oh yeah.
I will admit that I will admit this. I think a good way to establish a pacing thing is to use the kind of round system that you do see in MMA promotions. You know, where you have a set, you have like 3 or 5 rounds that each last a few minutes. It would also be a good way to establish tension, because maybe in this hypothetical you could have it that you're trying to win each round in a given amount of time to get a point, and whoever has the most points is the winner, and if it's a tie it goes to the judges.
Yeah. Like I'm sure there might be ways to tweak the MMA format to flow a little better if you're animating it, but that's getting way into the details.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, fundamentally, set it up like an actual MMA match as far as rules and structure go. Now the next question is like, how crazy out there would we want this to get? Like, I don't think any of us want it to hit DBZ levels of I'm gonna fire a beam in your face.
Nothing like that.
Yeah.
But in terms of going crazy when it comes to exaggerated strikes, oh, that I'm perfectly fine with. And one of the key principles of animation is being able to exaggerate. That's why I've always said that trying to do live action versions of anime is kind of pointless.
Yeah. I think like a good bar for where I'd like to keep it like just on the semblance of how exaggerated you'll get is Kenichi. Like, it's all actual martial arts stuff being done. Nothing is technically supernatural, even if their feats may be. Like Appa fucking roof jumping.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's kind of a good bar for where I'd want to see it. It's somewhere in that range.
One of the things that I would want to see in this kind of thing is utilizing the ring itself. You know, have somebody do some stunt of bouncing off the ring, or slamming somebody into the gates, or
just a wall run up the cage. Just a wall run and flip.
Or grinding someone's face along the gates, a la Ceres Victoria versus Zoran Blitz, or getting on top of the cage and then someone slipping and getting crotched.
I'm entirely down with that.
You know, especially with that last one, if you have a scene where that happens and everybody in the audience, even the commentators, cringe. As you are expected to do when you get hit in the balls.
Yeah, I'm definitely for like a bunch of just fun, crazy stuff like that. I mean,
if we're doing animation, my mindset is fuck realism.
Look, as long as it stays consistent, like, here's the rules of this world, this is how it operates, and stick with that, we're good.
With stuff we have seen through things like Food Wars and Dr. Stone, where you're able to dip into somewhat realistic material, but presented in an over the top way. And that's kind of what I'd be dipping into in this hypothetical.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'd want to see.
Now, I know I talk a lot about musical identity. I think for something like this, it would be very tempting to have each character have something of a leitmotif all to themselves when it's their match. You know, and probably dip into multiple genres. I know it would be tempting to go all metal with this kind of thing, but actually no. Say you're a keto character, their leitmotif is something that sounds more like jazz.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking about that kind of musical stuff. Like, I don't know what I would make the motifs be for each character. Like, obviously, you want them a similar enough style that it's not going to completely clash to the ear.
Well,
But
let's suppose that we're using Aikido, Muay Thai, Sambo, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. With like I said, with Aikido, a very jazz-like approach. With Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, especially if we can name drop the Gracie family. uh, I would say something neoclassical
I could see it.
for Muay Thai, something that involves a heavy amount of big ass drum. For Muay Thai, something that involves a heavy amount of guitar work. You know, tell somebody, listen to Yngwie Malmsteen. We want something like that.
I'd have no problem with any of that. Like, I can't really think of specifically what I'd do otherwise, so those all sound like good ideas to me.
Yeah, the key thing with this is keeping things as confined as we can, showing a bigger world that you're seeing through a small lens.
Yeah. Now, that all is a very solid skeleton so far we've got.
Hmm. If if I could get away with it, I would end up asking if Masaki Endo could do an opening, but that's punching above weight.
Yeah, like, the only thing, like, if we would go for the route of four instead of two, I do still kind of like the idea of one guy being a lot less conventional compared. It's weird because it's not an actual style, but I'm going to refer again to Kenichi. The first time, like, he's really shown to have just got his ass kicked and almost lost his motivation right before he actually becomes the resident disciple. It was that dude, like, fighting just with weird tricks. Like, he'd move, swipe his hair through Kenichi's face as he turned. Just weird shit like that. Not really a trained martial arts like you would expect. If you have the pool of people to work with, having a guy like that in there, I think, would be ideal. But again, I don't know what you would call that style or what kind of style you would most attribute that to. And it might be a little difficult to animate and make work with the rest of it, but I do like the idea of just that out of place guy in here. Out of place to a degree.
I would say a good way to do the out of place motif is somebody who managed to luck their way in, or feels like they have some imposter syndrome. I think that's a good way to approach that kind of motif that would but still fit within this.
Yeah. As I said, I think that guy from Kenichi, just fighting like that, really fits in well. Or they managed to make a guy like that fit in well in this world of much more professionally trained people than him, and yet he still was a threat. It was still really fun to watch fight.
It'd actually be interesting to
Yeah.
have the Aikido person take that kind of approach,
Yeah.
especially since Aikido is all about turning other people's energy against them.
Yeah. But yeah, a much more mischievous fighter than the rest. Like, not, ooh, I want to see you beaten for all your cheating kind of mischievous.
You want
But
the
a fun roguelike
troll
mischievous.
fighter.
Yeah, a fun rogue. Like, but yeah, the troll fighter. That people actually like. Like, the lovable rogue that is somehow here where he clearly does not belong.
You want the Monkey King. Got it.
Kind of, yeah. It's a good way to put it. The Monkey King.
Or Toru Yano in New Japan, whose nickname is the Sublime Master Thief. And I have nicknamed in the past Trollu Yano.
Yeah, I think that's a good description. That said, if we only go the route of two, maybe not.
And for the record, if there was more time, then maybe you can expand with a bunch of supporting characters. But like I said, I try and keep the cast small if I can get away with it.
Yeah, again, if we go the route 4, it's mostly gonna be building up just those 4 guys. Not a whole lot on any kind of like other matches they may be having. Like I wouldn't try to build like support and backstory for every match they're having until they come in contact with each other.
Oh.
If you do the route of just 2, that gives you more time to play with a bigger supporting cast, though. So it kind of depends on what way you'd want to go.
Yeah.
It's advantage and limitations to both.
Mm-hmm. Of course, part of that cast has to be the announcer's booth.
Yeah.
I mean, you need a you're gonna need somebody who can be the guy who explains the craziness to the audience.
Yeah. Now that leaves the question. I don't think we should really focus on like any kind of internal monologue during the matches. Just because you've kind of got the announcers. And I'd rather try to get the emotions across like through the actual animations, facials, and anything they may be saying to each other mid-fight. But yeah, I'd like to have like an actual announce team, as you would in like any normal sport or pro wrestling, to get a lot of that across.
Yeah, and usually in a lot of pro wrestling promotions, there's been the habit of having the more detail oriented guy, the person who's trying to explain the backstory in a concise way, and the person who is commenting / riffing on what they're seeing.
We need a solid color guy and a play-by-play.
I know that some promotions are doing 3-man booths. I am not a fan. I'm not the biggest fan of a 3-man booth. I feel like that's adding way too much. The only time you should really be doing a 3-man booth is if the third person is doing the guest commentary thing. Yes. and just adding a bit of chaos, which I'm not opposed to doing that. Doing that.
Like I think a 3-man booth would work better animated, just because you can sit there and plan this out in a way that you can't in a real match. At the same time, I still think the 2-man would be better for the most part. So yeah, I'm all for the 2-man commentator group.
Especially since when you're adding more characters in this, that means you're adding more stuff you need to put into a script.
Yeah. And especially if we decide to stick with the 4-man or out, yeah, just keep it to the 2 color commentators, color and a play-by-play. No need to complicate that bit anymore. Now that's the thing though, would we be using the same 2 for every match?
Yes.
Yeah. It shouldn't be too hard to find a way to justify them flying around depending on where the matches are having. Or just keep it all in a confined area for now.
The mindset that I
Yeah.
had to try and get around this, like I said, with that whole first and second half thing, the second half is taking place at one big tournament.
Yeah.
The first half is dealing with dealing with minor or smaller scale promotions that or similar matches that
Yeah.
they're going through in their rise to this big tournament where everybody's meeting up. Our announced team would be at this big event.
Yeah. And I wouldn't worry about putting too much focus on the announced team for the smaller promotions then if that's how we run it. Which I do
Yeah.
like that idea. Since the matches themselves aren't going to be nearly as big or important, I don't think we would need to put as much thought and effort into each smaller promotions commentary team. Yeah.
To give a parallels to what I mean by these smaller, consider this. This tends to be the route that is taken for an F1 driver. Usually you start out at a young age doing karts. Then you might move into a regional GP series, like say the Tokyo GP. Then you move up to something like Formula 2 or Formula 3. Usually 2 is considered the racers of the future kind of thing. Then you do well enough of that, then you move up to Formula 1. You do have a similar kind of thing in say NASCAR, where people start out in modified, late modified, or super modified on dirt short tracks, then move up to Cup, then move up to the at one point it was the Busch series. I don't remember what it's called now, and then you move up to the main series.
Here is a potential idea because theoretically, era that these fights take place in isn't going to have a huge impact on the fights themselves. So, depending on potential technology, we could have the same two announcers at each area. If we just kind of go with they are looking for people to come to this bigger setup.
I'd have it that you might have a shot of them where they're watching the minor leagues, but that's as far as I'd go on that front.
I'm just saying, like, if we really didn't want to have to do different announcers for everyone and just kind of keep a core two throughout, that's a way we could go about getting away with it. Like, they are the announcers, but maybe they're also kind of there watching for people specifically. Hence why you might see them all about. Mind you, this is basically just a cheap ploy to just not write different announcers and just be able to keep the same two the whole time. Just a random idea.
If it's stupid, but it works, it's not stupid.
Could also be kind of a clue into some people, like, hey, these guys are here announcing now. We know where they're from. Could also be an incentive for some people to kind of be, oh, I should be taking this bit seriously. So I think there's ways you could go about doing that. Again, hammer out the very fine details another day.
I would say I wouldn't have I know I did that linear chain of advancement, but I wouldn't have them all in the same minor leagues, because the idea is that they started out in the same area.
Yeah.
They each went their own paths, and then returned to square one.
That said, I wouldn't mind, like, saying, again, this is if we go the 4 route. Maybe 3 of them do. Troll Fighter's kind of the odd one out in that regard. Or maybe Troll Fighter's one of the 3. Who knows?
Possibly. That's
Yeah.
a good definition. That's a good possibility of a definite maybe.
Yeah. That would, of course, leave us with one distinct problem depending on how far we go with this. Who wins? But I don't think we
Oh
need to answer that right now.
no. In fact, we could just as well do an open ended thing where it ends in a draw, but
Yeah.
the follow up to that match is is going to be a main event in a future pay per view or something like that.
Like, inevitably, someone's got to win.
Yeah, but we don't have to show it.
I don't like that. I hate the inconclusive draw endings.
I'm just saying that that's
I
one
know.
way we could do. I'm just saying that's one thing
do
we
it.
could do.
If we go the route of the two guys, we could definitely do it.
As far
I think
as
that'd
as
be
far as
bullshit if we went the route of four.
as far as the four, I'm leaning towards the Aikido guy who thinks that they're out of their depth, but has gained confidence over over
Yeah.
the course of the story.
I mean, I personally would love to root for that,
Is
but that also feels a little like too much of the easy choice. The out
sometimes
of
you got to
place
go with
guy.
the obvious.
Exactly. Of course, depending on how far we split between parts 1 and 2, read the crowd. We're writing this thing, we can change it.
Yeah.
Like, if for some reason everybody just seems to fucking hate one of these people, we don't have to have them win.
I actually think it would be more interesting that at the end of it it is a draw, but that comes down to the judges. But I wouldn't have it that the final decision is dominant even by that.
Yeah.
It would be a case of like a like a bit like one character barely getting more points than the
Yeah.
other.
It'd either be a very slim margin of point win, a judge decision, or potentially like just an I don't want to say out of nowhere knockout, but it's clear when he wins, he's the winner, but it was not a close call. I definitely don't want this to be I would want you to think if they ever fought again, the other guy would have a chance of winning. Like a real chance. I think there's a lot of ways you could write that to give that conclusion. But that's definitely how I'd want it to end. I don't want like an absolute decisive victor out of all this.
But I'd say with all that pretty much covers everything unless there's something we missed. This was obviously not going to be as in depth as the isekai idea,
Oh yeah.
but it is an interesting challenge to work with.
I'm going over. Like, we probably want to decide like how strict are the rules? Like, are we going to allow for a nut kick? Are
No.
balls in play? No. Okay.
No nut kicks, and no kidney punches. And the reason to be that strict is to make it very clear when somebody's somebody's meant to be the villain, where they much like how a heel will find ways to cheat and get away with it, you are drawing on that same kind of thing. And I'm not saying cheating like say sneaking in like they've snuck in brass knucks in their tights or something like that. But
yeah, we're not gonna go full pro wrestling here.
But like finding ways to do a low blow that just happens to put them in a position where
The ref can't see it.
the ref can't see it, or you have a draw where a villain thought they got away with it, but they end up getting docked points by one of the judges because they aimed for the throat and he saw it.
All this does give us an interesting opportunity, because if we go in not having set who's going to win it at the end, And if you were to split it apart so you would have enough time between to just, again, gauge the reaction of the actual people watching the show, you could turn somebody heel.
I would not, however, do the
Yeah.
scrapbooking method that Disney has become infamous for lately. You know, where they make a bunch of story beats and endings, and then build a film based on which ones get tested the most positively.
Yeah, I'm just saying, just give it time, see how the audience reacts to the show, and possibly tailor part two accordingly. Like, if it's clear everybody hates one of the characters, maybe don't have them win it. Assuming you would have time to make those changes anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big assumption, though. All right, then. I think then that covers it all. So then, with this theoretical anime that's probably never going to exist out of the way, we will see you next time on The Adventures of the Monk and the Monarch.
Stay frosty.